and do all this
Okay,
stuff.
so what I need to do? Do I have to hereby call the meeting to order?
Yep.
Good.
Okay, I hereby call the meeting to order for the Ethics Commission of Taneytown.
Okay, your agenda item tonight, your first one is,
Point of order. Minutes.
they're not on there.
They're not on the,
That's right, there you go. Start with minutes.
okay. Let's review the minutes and take a moment and then see if there's anything that needs to be adjusted.
I move that we accept minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes have been accepted and passed. Okay, so we're on to new business.
New business.
Review of candidate campaign finance forms.
So, the campaign finance law requires that in the month following the election, the candidates have to file their next report. And so the month following the election, as we talked about the last meeting, is the end of June. So the candidates file their end of June report, and they either have to show all the contributions and expenses since the prior report, and then they show either what balance they bring forward or that they have no balance in their accounts. So you have these.
These are the new ones right here.
These are this is like the historical ones, in case you wanted to go through what has been filed.
These are what's new.
So
Okay.
if you want to see somebody's. So, you pass them all out, just like we did before.
Everybody take a look at each one.
With the initials on it. And we have two here. Paul Chamberlain said he was out of the country, so he did not file anything. He said his report would have been the same as the last one he filed.
No
So-
change. He's saying no change from the last report?
So you don't really have a report, so what we did was, this is his last report, but it's not really filed.
Is it acceptable for us to receive a paper that says no change from last report as their report, or do we need them to resubmit it with a new date on it?
I would think you
I
need to have it
think,
resubmitted.
yeah.
Right now, all we have is an email saying my financial report was the same as before, so
Okay.
that's the only thing with his, he was self-funding, that's the whole point. So-
Right.
So that one, I mean, is here, but I'm not sure you're going to get anything out of that.
Ooh, fancy.
Well, it only took us 4 times to get.
Do you just want us to initial on the front of this?
Yep.
Jay, on this campaign financing summary report, it is totally blank, yet the last page, totally blank,
Okay.
but the last page shows an expenditure, credit card expenditure for signs.
Okay?
Shouldn't that appear on
It
here?
should appear on the
Expenditures.
expenditure part, right there. Even though she's self-financing, she's showing the expenditures because she has to show her expenditures.
And then this is not signed.
Right, I guess she didn't. Right, so there should be a blue marker there, and then she should do the bottom of the page.
So is there a particular page that's better to sign?
Just the front page, whichever one is the front on your thing, unless you dropped it on the floor. That makes sense. So that one was Foster, and that was the summary page needs to have the expenditure put in, and then it needs to be signed.
Do you want me to put a little arrow up here too?
Yep, that'd be great.
Okay, super. I used 2 of my 5 arrows.
We didn't know you need more.
Yeah, thank you.
You want us to put, just initial the sign here, or?
I just
Initial on the top of the
initialed
page.
the page. Just,
This is for errors.
Oh, just initials, I signed my name.
Oh.
Okay. I didn't date it though. I didn't date it. It's the 11th, right?
Yep, 7-Eleven.
Let's see this. Yeah, this one was all filled out. Okay. Yeah, he filled his out, so.
And signed it and dated it.
So. So that was it. So that's Diane's only expense. Okay.
Can I see one of those old, or the last reports,
What would you like to see?
Rhonda's?
Immediate last one?
Well, it says it's self-financing. She's pointed at here.
Where's that amount?
I thought it said NA.
Dream it.
And come right around here so you can see.
Yeah.
So those are her expenses. Is that the page?
Yeah, that's the page I was. Thinking of expenditures afterwards, but I should know better.
Where was that expensed? Oh. That's why. I guess pass both of those down. So everybody on it.
You guys got anything down there?
Pass it on. Oops, sorry.
Catherine, am I to take it that you're carrying forward a balance of 251.60?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, you written 160.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the last number on the cash balance.
Hey, Jay, on this one, there's a an affidavit of self-funding. That's the good news. The bad news is, there's nothing reported. So apparently there was nothing spent.
Well, who do we have?
Judy, do you want to look at her?
I was wondering what she got.
Let's look at her other.
I mean, that doesn't sound right.
Look at the back of there, they'll have a, I don't remember if she had a sign up anywhere or not.
Yeah, look.
Okay, so she expended, so does that means in this period, she didn't expend any money?
It was
Oh,
just in
okay.
that period.
It was just in this period.
Right, she didn't raise any money or spend any money
Oh, okay,
on this
okay,
period.
okay, I got it.
And since she's self-funding, she's required to fill out that affidavit.
Right, okay.
Oh, are we supposed to sign every page or just the
No,
front?
just
Okay. You just have to sign the front page.
Right.
There.
Or initial.
somebody was
that's-
ambitious back then.
Yeah. Well, let me make sure every page was here.
I guess we need
That's,
to,
it's verifying every page was present. That's why. None?
should we put a little thing on here that didn't annotate which report it was?
Front page isn't checked.
They just complete the forms.
Jay, am I remember under campaign finance reform that you can keep the money, but it has to be used for a future campaign?
Right.
Okay.
You can give the money away, so any surplus.
Yeah, I saw somebody gave away, they did donations around town. So if you hold it, then it needs to be used for an election, but it can't be used for anything else.
Well, then you have continued reporting obligations at that point.
Okay.
Can't you give it back to
You can give it back to the contributors.
Pro rata. You
Yeah,
have to give it
pro rata.
So you have to figure out what the pro rata distribution is. Meaning that somebody gave you $100 and you had $100 left, you couldn't just give it to that person. If 5 people gave you $100 each.
You divide it between, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, done that one.
Wow. That's okay. Yeah. Oh. Has everybody signed each of them? I know you're still working.
I haven't seen
Oh,
one.
here, this one.
Which?
I signed down the bottom with you, so I'll sign at the top.
Yeah, I'll probably do the same thing. Initials.
Which one haven't you seen? Okay.
Which one?
Catherine Adley.
Catherine.
Oh.
So it looks like we had one filing that needed a couple of things in it. Or should be contacted by the city office about that? Okay. pending those pieces, it looks good to go.
So what were we gonna do with Paul Chamberlain's? Just hold it and have him file when he comes back, is that?
I think,
Or,
I mean, your next meeting, absent any special thing, would be in January of next year. Probably
Don't-
at some time.
Don't we have to go over staff stuff?
And that, yeah, after theirs will be due at the end of January.
Okay.
And the filings for the candidates would be due at the end of December. So you probably wouldn't meet till February. And by next February, you'll have gotten all about Mr. Chamberlain. So my thought would be, we get him to come in and fill out the report. You saw how many pages it is, put it together in a PDF and email it to you. We'll look at it, you guys look at it and just say, hey, I think it's okay or not okay. And we'll deal with it. Because otherwise, I can't see coming back in and have another meeting just for that.
Right, that sounds sufficient. But we do want a complete, filled-out report.
right,
I can
it
understand
should
it.
comply.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it was probably from an oversight. Clara talked to him, and he just said, that's what it is, we need to have it on. So, the way I read it, make sure we're all in agreement, is the self-funding candidates, except for Chamberlain, since he doesn't have one, are all compliant, except for the minor changes, and they're done, because they have no money left in their accounts. Ms. Kreisig and Ms. Adelaide have money left in their accounts, so they are due to file a report at the end of December. So December 31st. You have to file a report by December 31st. And at that time, it's either continuing the account like the statute says, or it shows distributions to draw the count out.
Back down to zero, right.
So you had one of those, you saw how that was done here. It was the local charities. Good? Yes. Plan for those things? And
So-
all right, we collect.
May it be so. We'll get there. Was it a question on these forms? Was it a question on the form itself?
Yes. Couple of comments. You want me to go to the mic or just, can I talk?
It's up to the chair.
It's fine if you want
I think you
to
can
speak
hear
from,
me.
we can all hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you noticed that Ron and I both filed these last reports on May 31st. There was no change since then, but I did want to just clarify why we did that. The language, actual language on the board report says due last day of the month following the election. So the election was May, last day of the month following the election is May 31st. The law, which I didn't get to it until I was afraid of missing the deadline. So I got these in first, and then when I checked the actual statute, which is section 18.2D, it says shall be filed on the last day of the month following the month in which the election was conducted. That's when I realized it was June. So it might be helpful when you do these forms next year, if you were to put that there, so it wouldn't be confusing. I had a number of these issues that were confusing, but I tend to be a very technical writer and a technical reader, so when I look at it, and then I think Rhonda had sent Clara an email just making sure that what we filed would still be acceptable for today. There were no other changes for either of us. She would be here, but she's in Florida right now on vacation, so. And then, this isn't really your problem since you didn't pass the law, but there are no definitions in this campaign finance law like there are with the state. So I found it to be very cumbersome to try to really decipher a lot of this law without having definitions. I thought you should be aware of it, that this law should have definitions. Because in probably not having definitions, when the city council passed this law, is it can, you don't have a definition to go to, people can decide what things mean, and that can be used to target unpopular candidates. They don't, they could let it slide with one, so it's very important to have definitions, but that's something I'm going to take up with the city council. But I thought as the board, you should be aware that this was patterned after the state campaign finance law, and it has definitions. The state does. And Councilman Frazier had mentioned that there were no definitions. So to me, for me, it was a big problem. I spent way too much time trying to make sure that it was correct, guessing without definitions. But that's not your problem because you can't change it, although you can make a recommendation to the city council that they do add definitions to this for next year. This is probably just a thing with the clerk. My name is misspelled on the website. I don't know, it's a K instead of a C, and Paul Chamberlain's name is misspelled also. I don't know if that's just the webmaster or if it's something you could change.
I'll make them aware of it.
Okay. I can send you an email, that's a small thing. And, let's see. I didn't understand about the pro rata, so thanks for explaining that. Oh, I know. I didn't have time to really, make an issue out of this issue, but I was always really not clear about whether a candidate can contribute more than $500 to their own campaign.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I was never clear whether a candidate who was not self-funding could contribute more than $500 to their own campaign. I chose not to, but again, I found the law ambiguous on it, and in the future, I think it would be helpful. I suspect if you didn't talk to Mr. Fellow, you all might, if you read it, you might come up with, some of you would say yes, some of you would say no. So just for in the future, it's just a point of clarification. As a candidate, I would have rather contributed more money to my campaign than have to get contributors, but I wasn't sure how the law read, so I just made sure. I sort of got the impression that nobody could go over $500 from the law, so I kind of, but also, if they went over 250, contributors who didn't want to have to do all this paperwork, which some people thought was not really legal and unenforceable, so I tried to keep it easy, and when they wanted to contribute, I said, well, according to the law I'm reading, if you don't go over $250, you won't have to file all these reports. Because my impression was that once somebody contributed more than $250, they would have to continue to file reports all through this, just like we did. Again, I'm guessing about it, but just to keep things simple, many of my contributors just stop at $249 or $250 to keep it from having to file reports, because they're busy. They want to contribute, but they didn't want to have to spend the time doing that. And then I just made sure I didn't contribute more than $500 to my own campaign. So, but again, this is something that was an issue that came up for me.
I think the state, you yourself and your spouse can give you as much as you want, but you have to report it. You have to be accountable.
But here, it's section 18.9, letter B. The contributions of a candidate to the candidate's own campaign are not subject to the limitations of this section, and said monetary contributions need not pass through a campaign account, provided that such self-funded contributions do not exceed $500 and/or no other contributions are received by said candidate.
Well, that's what made me think I couldn't do it. Is that your impression?
No, my impression is you can self-contribute to yourself up to $500.
Right, up to $500.
Right.
My question was, I wanted to contribute more than $500.
According to this, I don't think you can.
I think that what it says, this is 2 years from now, we'll go through this again,
Oh, probably.
right? But if you wanted to embrace this and understand it, the limit is on two different sides, what you can accept and what you can spend. If you accept money from anyone else, you're not self-funding. There's number one. If you don't accept money from everybody else, but you spend more than $500, you have to go through a campaign account.
Exactly.
You can do it, but you have to run it through in a campaign account. So the people that didn't accept money and didn't accept more than $500 did not have to go through a campaign account. And your examples were Foster and Fuller. They didn't spend more than $500. They didn't accept anybody else's money. Vigliotti accepted other people's money. Therefore, he was not self-funding because he accepted whatever it was. So therefore, When you're not self-funding, you automatically have to have a campaign account. And then the limitations of what people can give you are clearly listed in restrictions on campaign contributions 18.9A. And the notion that other people have to fill out reports are, if you read this, if there's a contribution to you, then you're under the limitation. If you're going to do it on behalf of a person, then you have to do your own. So that is if it's its own person and they're out there campaigning. So they spend money, and that's what that section basically says, reporting of individual expenses, where 18-5, if they expend a cumulative of $250 in cash or contributions to assist the promotion of the success or defeat of a candidate. That's not a contribution.
So if any, so if Catherine, there's a group out there that wants to support Catherine, once they spend over $250, they have to file, even if they're not giving it to her, if they're doing something on her behalf, like the order of whatever, they have to, once they reach that threshold, they have to turn this stuff into.
Yeah, like a political action committee.
Right.
So
political action
we
committees.
have a real example about that. So we can talk about the real example that was brought to the board's attention that we needed to talk about right at the election. During the election, at the last week or whenever it was, there were robocalls that went out to the city, and they were supporting candidates. They had two candidates' names in it, Miss Adelaide, Miss Kreisig. And under this rule, it talks about robocall specifically, what you had to have. And the robocall did have at the beginning the person's name on it.
I think it had his name and where he was from.
Where he's from, which specifically is in here. So that robocall was not cash to a contribution to a candidate. Because if it was, it would have shown up, and it didn't show up. So therefore, it was an expenditure by another person, either an individual or a group. But so it's one of those two. And what we don't know right now is whether or not that expenditure was less than $250. If it was less than $250, no harm, no foul, everything is fine.
It's not reportable, right?
But if it's more than $250, then it's reportable, meaning they have to fill out their own because they were doing their own thing in support of a candidate. If that same situation would use, that's the fact pattern. Now let's do the hypothetical. They gave X amount of dollars, pick whatever it is, $100, to Miss Adelaide for robocalls. She arranged the robocalls. On her form, on the income side, she would have $100, and on the expense side, she would have Robocall Inc. So that's a contribution, and then she did the work, as opposed to somebody else.
Okay.
The other person would have the same situation. They spent, if they had to file, more than $250. So in our scenario, they spent $300 on robocalls. They would have shown $300 expenditure robocalls. If they raised money, they would show where they raised the money if it was for this. Otherwise, it was just a simple expenditure side report.
I've never seen a form for that.
For
If I gave her $500, then I'd have to report the $250. I've never seen a,
you don't have to. That's not the law. If you give her $500, first of all, you're limited to what you can give to everybody.
Yeah.
So if you give the maximum or whatever, you give the number, you don't have to have a form or anything. She has the requirement. She's obligated to fill out the form. She's obligated to report the money.
I would fill out this individual form?
You would fill out because you're a campaign.
Right, but who does this, the one for the individual?
Okay, so an individual, the person that did robocalls is not a group now in my scenario, okay? Or the person that puts up signs says, support Catherine Adelaide, with the name on the bottom, John Smith. He's not a candidate. He's not a political action committee. John Smith has to fill out that form if he spends more than $250 doing what he's doing.
if he puts on there by authority by John Smith?
He has to.
Yes.
Signs come down.
So that makes him have to report it.
Right.
But I still haven't seen a form that they have to report. Personally, I haven't, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, nobody did that. But if they would have to fill out the one marked individual. of the top 3 forms that you saw, the one marked individual is what they would do.
I think everybody said either NA or spelled it out not applicable or whatever.
Right, because the candidates
Right.
would never have to do that. So the real-world example would be if somebody, we'll use something, this wasn't in effect then, the charter petition that happened last November, okay? If an individual decided they were going to put signs up that said, "Vote for the charter amendment," and they spent more than $250 doing it,
They would have to.
under this rule, they would have to file these reports.
Now, would they be considered, this may
They would be
off-
considered an individual, especially there because there is no candidate.
only if there's more than one person and it's a pack?
If there's more than one person, then they're not an individual and they would be a committee, because it says there has to be 2 or more people. So candidates, I mean, if you look at it with 3 different scenarios, anything a candidate does is reportable. If a candidate spends 5 cents, that's reportable. If a candidate receives any money, it's reportable. So candidates, every transaction you make is reportable. Other people are only reportable if they do more than 250. And then the form they fill out is the same form, whether they mark it political action group or individual, it depends on who they are.
But they still cap out at 500, right?
No one can spend more than the limit, except a candidate.
So so under B here, if you could spend more than like I could have spent more than $500 on my own campaign, but once you hit 500, you have to open a campaign account.
Right,
Once you give $501 to yourself, you have to open a campaign account.
correct.
Or if somebody else, once you go over 500,
Once you accept any money, you have to open a campaign account.
If I give you $5 for your campaign, you have to open a campaign account. If you receive money from me, if you can give to yourself $499.99 from your own money and not have to open a campaign account, but once you go to $500.01, you're required by the law to open a separate account, a campaign finance account.
And the
Even if
filings
it's your
that we
own.
I
had,
just said once I take anything, any kind
If you're self-funding, once you go over $500, you actually have to open even
Right.
if it's just you self-funding, if you give over $500 to yourself, you have to open a campaign finance account. If you accept money from anybody else, then it's not self-funded. Every cent has to be accounted that people have given to you, and that has to go in a campaign finance account. So if you self-fund, and you stay under the $500 threshold, then you don't have to have an account.
right, but as soon as you take money from anybody,
Yep.
Right.
you have an account, and if you don't take money from anybody, but you self-fund over $500.
You still have to open an account, right?
Okay, but you can give yourself, donate more than $500 to your own account.
You can donate unlimited money to your own account, you just have to account for it, but it has to be in a campaign account.
Right.
Which then you have to show what you do with that afterwards, so
Right, I understand
you
all
want to
those factors.
expend it, otherwise it's going to have to stay, in that account or,
Right.
or be pushed back out, so.
And I
Is that
wasn't,
correct?
right,
I
Okay.
never heard the robocall, I only heard about it, so I heard about it after the fact. But I was a little confused about, at first I thought if somebody did it, that I had to do my own candidate and I had to do one for that individual. I think I sent you an email on it, you said, no, the
Right.
individual has to do it. But if for some reason the individual doesn't do it, how do you enforce that?
same way we're going to talk about enforcing on the robocalls. What do you want to do about it?
The person who needs to be contacted and needs to disclose whether or not they spent over $250 as far as I'm concerned.
They need to know the rule. If they spent
Exactly.
over $250, they need to come down and fill out the proper paperwork to be in compliance with the law.
That's the directive you want?
Yeah, I think I'll make a
This is the
motion
second
that,
time this has happened from the same
If they
group,
didn't
so-
expend $250, then
I'll make a motion
they're-
that takes place.
But they probably should send us some sort of response saying, yes, we spent over $250, or no, we did not. And I would actually like to see a receipt from the purchase of that robocall that can then prove that they did not. Otherwise, anyone can say anything that they want. And what we want is honest and fair and transparent elections. in town, because it can wind up being another group doing it, and because it upsets people on either side, and we don't want that.
I'd personally do away with them, period. They don't do any good. And they irritate people when they get them.
Well, they do, but there's something called the First Amendment, it's freedom of speech.
Well, the issue that has been, I heard your motion.
I motion, and Steve Marsalek seconded it, that we proceed with the
Discussion.
letter and do as Pastor
Okay,
Steve
so all in
described.
favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion,
Is that for written notification or just a phone call? Or what's-
Written notification.
written notification when requesting response with receipts.
It
So-
might be good to advertise that, too.
Well, the discussion that has been had just internally was, how did this work and everything. It worked the way the council intended. It created transparency, created some work, and it was the first time trying to figure these things out. And people had problems with the wordings of the form, but if you take everything in general, what did this do? It required everybody to talk about what they spent and what they got. And that was the point of the whole exercise. So the robocalls created an issue because you had an outside group, and we always talk the hypothetical. We always said like the sheriffs or the police or the FOP, that was the example. But now we have a real world example. And the solution that if people don't comply is you'll take that 250 limit, you won't, but you get to council, and you'll drop that down to 0. Because if you spend any money in supporting a candidate, you'll have to file something at that point. So it's the same thing, is that when you abuse the system is there shouldn't have a way out or a loophole. Hopefully we don't have to do that. I'm hopeful that they'll send a letter saying it was 10 cents a call, I don't know what they cost, a penny a call, and there's no way we did 2,500 calls because you don't have that many households or something like that. I mean, that's easy enough to do. But what we'll do is we'll get that, we'll see how it works, we'll give it a reasonable amount of time, we'll inform you via email how it worked. If there's a solution, we'll give you the solution. If there's no solution, we'll see whether we need to meet again or what we do. I mean, the ordinance gives you a lot of power to do lots of things, so this is step one.
So if it is over $500, though, the only requirement would be that they complete the,
Come fill out,
for the individual.
come,
250, not 500,
Right, if it's over 200.
and they have to come fill out the form depending on what they are. I think this guy identified himself he was part of an organization, as I recall.
Yeah.
So,
here's the question I have.
It's a pro-life thing.
It was for 2 candidates. So if $499 was spent, and since it was 2 candidates, we'd have to evenly divide that, then they'd be under.
well,
How do we, because it was mentioning 2 candidates instead of 1. So then theoretically, I'm like, do you need to split?
no, because it's not on what you did. It's not on how you helped. It was what did you spend? I spent
Okay.
$499 in support of something.
Okay.
So the nexus is there, not 10 that idea. So that
Okay.
when you read that, and whether they fill out the campaign form or the individual form it's the same form. I mean, it's
Yeah.
largely irrelevant. It's just like which form do you fill out for your taxes. You can fill out a 1040 EZ if you qualify, the same as you can fill out a 1040. It's the same information. So. All right, so
Thank
we'll
you.
take care of that. We'll let you know how it goes. Other business.
I do want to thank you, Ms. Adelaide, for letting us know of the things that you were struggling with, definition-wise. It's certainly something for us to take under advisement, and maybe some linking to the state website that describes those could possibly be done. We'll discuss that. And for trying to stay within the letter of the law. I appreciate your diligence in doing that. It's important, and we hope everybody does, so we don't wind up with, having to call people to come back in and having lots of meetings, and
Well, even
we're
with
just
Rhonda
looking
not
for.
being trained in the law, even I had trouble. I mean, it's not that people intentionally were doing it.
Right.
She was just like, just try. I was like, no, let me go over it. And, I found a bunch of mistakes in hers, not because she wanted to. She just did not understand. She read it, didn't understand. Although there was one that she read that I got wrong, but she got it right. So,
Well, it was the
it was
first.
great to do a candidates workshop on understanding really what this means, because there's so much at stake And, you know, the threat of having your name removed from a ballot is pretty serious. And so I think, and it seems like you did, like you caught one where I over-filed, you know, really siphoning out so that it's fair and impartial, whether somebody was trying to deliberately duck it or whether they made an honest mistake, I think is something you guys seem like you're really trying to make an honest effort to, you know, give people the benefit of the doubt, at least on the first time around.
That was the first big test of this too, for all of us, so.
And actually, I have more comments. I sent at a time. I was like, I'm not going to deal with it now. I wasn't going to nitpick over every little thing. I thought when the election's over, then I'll sit down and go back through it again and just give you feedback if you want it on ways that I found and I'm sure Jay will attest to this, the big law dumbing. If I can, I dummy proof things. I go, if I can understand it, I'll make it so clear, pretty much any dummy can understand it. And I'm not ashamed to call myself a dummy when dummy proofs things, because I always go, well, even this, I was so technical and literal about it, the way I read it, until I read the actual law, but I was trying to get this in on time, and then I was like, oh, that makes it clearer. And there was another one that did it too, and someone who was drafting it, I guess, I'll show it to you. They were actually trying to make it clear, but they double stated it, and it made it unclear. So I kept some notes on this, and I just stuck it in a file, and when I get some time, I'll be glad to, you know, so that it would be easier for other people, because I could have spent the time campaigning. I spent more time than I really had anticipated trying to make sure that this was done so that it was without question. So, thank you. Paul.
Thank you.
I have a recommendation since we were 6 months before meeting again. I would like something more definition of self-funding. In other words, I guess a good thing would be the workshop that's suggested for all candidates as to how to fill out the forms and various other things. And to complete them, it made it so simple to go through Joe's, where he had put 0 where some of them just left it blank, period. And you don't know what they're doing. So, you know, it doesn't take that much time. You just do it one time.
We're having a sample filled out form, because that was my concern too. And I said, well, I'm just going to make sure if a page gets lost or this happens, so I did mine a certain way. I think in the future, especially, we want to encourage people who never run for, you know, it's a city council, it's a great starting place for people to step into government and run for public office, and most of them don't have any experience. So just, if you had a sample form that showed exactly what would make it easier for you guys to read, I think that would be helpful to candidates. So it wouldn't be so intimidating for them and go, oh, I don't know how to run.
That's probably a good idea.
The issue that
John
was the
did.
problem was this came up, the self-funding aspect came up at the end of the adoption process. Okay? And is the problem with this whole thing. Because a self-funding candidate has to do everything else. Okay? The theory when the self-funding idea was launched out there was saying, I'm self-funding, I shouldn't have to fill out your forms. But I still have to fill out my expense side of the equation, which is basically 2 of the 3 forms that you have, the summary form and the expense form. You just don't have any other one. The only benefit you get by being self-funding is the fact that if you don't spend more than $500, you don't have to put it in the bank. You don't have to have your own bank account.
Still have to fill out the forms.
Still have to fill out the forms. So in the beginning, the self-funding candidates had a right confusion. They said, I'm self-funding, and they didn't fill out any of the forms. They were like, hey, you got to fill out these even if they don't apply. And then it was like, oh, we got to fill these out and the self-funding. I thought we did that in the beginning, and we don't have to do it. It was like, oh, you got to keep filling the affidavit out every time to make sure we know you're still self-funding. That should be clarified. If you took all the self-funding things away and just had in there that if you spend more than $500 of your own money, you have to put it in the bank, a separate bank account, that's it. It solves all the problems with self-funding affidavits and which form do you need, because every time it just be like a balance sheet, income, expenses, and the summary. And then the people that had their own income, they put down what money they donated themselves. Mm-hmm. It would match the money that they spent.
But the banks have to figure out how they're going to handle it too, because I found that out 2 years ago. And then I think Rhonda found it out, one of them anyway, found it out this time that she had trouble. They didn't know what she's talking about.
Right.
Which tells me gives me kind of wonder about them in Carroll County.
I mean, it depended on the bank. Joe Vigliotti went to the bank before anybody else got his thing done and said it took 20 minutes. So I guess it's on your banking institution. The whole thing is that's the hassle. Okay, but that is the check and balance, because if you wanted to break this law, you can break this law. This is not designed to catch people. This is designed to be a disclosure that if it comes out later, well, then you'll get found out. I mean, you guys don't audit these things. If I got a donation and I was a candidate and I just put it in my own bank account and how would you know? You wouldn't. But it's like the IRS. When you get found out, you lose your seat on the council if you were one of them. So, I mean, the stakes are pretty high. So.
And just along the thing about the self-funding again, one of the things came back, I kept turning this in, and Rhonda was like, I said, no, here's what the language says. Note this form must be filed each time a report is due. Each time a report is due. It didn't qualify it by saying each time a report is due if you're self-funding. If it had just said self-funding, so I said, I'm not getting caught. It says each time a report is due. I interpreted that to be safe, that it applied to everybody. It made a lot of extra paperwork, but if that's what you want, I would, each time a report is due if you're self-funding. Because I think the point of the self-funding form was you wanted whoever was self-funding, they had to report each time if they were self-funding. But once somebody wasn't self-funding anymore, why should they have to keep turning this form in? But I went ahead and did it anyway just because that language wasn't there. So, and then also there was, it's okay, submitted by 5 o'clock, and in the paper it was posted at 4 o'clock. Seems like a small thing unless you're a last-minute person like me. So, the time should match up. But I have a little list of these things. I'll try to put them together. Just as we were starting to talk about it, some of it started coming back, and I was like, well, I know Carol leaves at 4. I think you had said it was 4. I'm like, but the form says 5. And I was like, we made sure we got to you by 4. But seems like a little things, but I'm a detail person, so I'd like to see the times match up for what's published in the paper and what's on the forms. How should I?
It meant that was on purpose, just so you know. That 5 o'clock, you could drop it in the box. She didn't have to get it, and if it was there when she came in the first day, next day, then it was received. So, I mean, the whole thing is that when we looked at this in the abstract, which is what we're doing now, we're thinking all these things that could happen. It was real simple. After everybody who filed a candidate, we had 5 people that we could work with. They had questions, they contacted Clara, they were told what the answers would be. If they had to fill out a form that really didn't matter, okay, they filled out the form that really didn't matter. I mean, the idea was to have complete disclosure, which is what they did. And it's an effort. It was an effort on everybody's part. The idea of having like a workshop for the candidates, I mean, how is that going to work? Every single time you're going to have a workshop? Any candidate that had a question, all they had to do was ask Claire. We got them answers. You got your answers every time you had a question. And it's not a gotcha thing. When did you all have anything here that said, gotcha? It was, you figured this out, and when it was prior to the election day, you guys gave everybody every chance to come in and fill the forms out. And you had stated, and it was stated by the council, that the people that would be punished were the ones that didn't comply on purpose. I'm not filling out your forms. Okay, then you're not going to be a candidate in our election. But I'm filling out your forms as best I can, and you did that with Ms. Kreisig. She couldn't get her bank account set up by the due date. She said, all right, see you in another week. She did. So I think that the idea of there's a gotcha involved has to be taken out. That the candidate should want this as much as the people want this. Is that this is my way to show I raised all this money, I'm real popular. Or I didn't raise any money and I still got elected, whatever the deal is.
But the candidates also want there not to be an appearance that there's an ability to play I got you and not having definitions. So,
Well, the definition issue, I get you on that, I heard that. And the way you make it sound is good, but the council specifically talked about definitions. They were going to include definitions. They were going to adopt the state definitions. And then they changed their mind 180 degrees when they read the definitions and said, we don't want those definitions included. And they specifically chose not to have definitions. And it was conscious because the state definitions don't necessarily match up to the way this would work. So, I mean, you certainly need to debate what you want to do. If it's changes to the form, we can make our changes right here, you guys can do that. If it's changes to the statute, then you make a play to the council and you talk to them about it. But, you know, there's issues involved, and there's also a time issue. The thought was that we would come up with a brochure of how to fill this out that was talked about. And the council, the manager sat down with me and said, we need to do this. What's it going to take? And we talked about the hours and the permutations. It's like having the book of how to fill out your tax return. You know how thick that is because you're trying to get every least common denominator? And it was like, that's not necessary, because you're going to have such a small pool of candidates. Even if you had a dozen, it would be easier to work with them with their questions. We do that with all the financial disclosure forms that you get, the ones they have to file in the beginning, with 40-some people when they have a question. What's your question? This is how you should fill this out. So it's just a more efficient use of time. They want a campaign, you want transparency. That's what this process was about.
But originally your board purpose was for ethics complaints, not this. And I was advised not to fill out many of these forms because they are believed to be unconstitutional and would not hold up in court of law. I chose not to do that because I did not want to have that legal challenge. I wanted to run for office. So I did bend over backwards to, you know, accommodate every aspect of that. But when you know, and I'm proud of Taneytown in Manchester. They had 3 candidates. They had nobody running against them. So to me, the fact that Taneytown had, but there was considered, you know, inside government candidates and outside candidates. And so I know the board wants to make sure there's not an appearance that this is all designed to catch and take people's names off the ballots who are outside of the government, because that did happen. And a lot of it happened with Frazier, and a lot of all of this was to make sure it didn't happen again. And I'm glad that it didn't happen again. So, you know, there may be legal challenges to these forms, and because, I mean, I had some questions about it too, but for the time being, I went through it. But the other thing too is, when I tried to get your names and contact information from the city office, the city manager attempted to put me through a PIA request, which I spent most of the day doing legal research on, and he finally backed down and gave me names. But in the interest of transparency in this government, you are the ethics board. And I think your name should be on the website, posted somewhere, and there should be a way for citizens to contact you if they have concerns or questions, or how to file an ethics complaint, or, you know, so that transparency works both ways. You know, you want the people to trust that you are not just the government people who are going to support the government, but that you're here for the voters too. And so I found it disconcerting that instead of just, he finally did, but I had to go through the county attorney, I had to go through the attorney general's office to get a whole bunch of law to say, no, that's not a public interest, a public information request. That is general information. Everyone in this town should know who you are and, you know, be able to contact you if they need to and not have to go through the city office all the time. So I hope maybe you could, you know, get it up on the website. I think Mr. Hine did assure me, although I haven't checked or I haven't seen it. You know, I said, are you going to, the Board of Elections, the Board of Ethics, we're going to create these boards. The citizens should know who's on these boards and have a way to contact them. Doesn't that seem reasonable?
That's not the way it's done. That's just simply not the way it's done. You're not supposed to contact these individuals outside the city office. If you file a complaint, there's a way to do it. It's filed with the city office. There's a complaint form. If you want to contact the Board of Elections, they're really not, because if you contacted any one of them, what would be your next phone call? To the city office to say, what's going on? We need to get a complaint form. We need to get a meeting together. They have no staff. This is the staff. They're not an outside group, and that's what you don't get. But this debate's all hypothetical and theoretical. I mean, we're here to, is there any other new business? Because right now we're just chatting.
But what you just said can be published on the website so that the average citizen...
You need to talk to the people that do that. It's not these people, it's not me. I mean, you need to talk to the city council. You're at every meeting, talk to them and tell them what you want. Put it in writing, send them a letter. I mean, we don't have the power to put stuff on the website, right?
The city manager doesn't.
He's not here. You'd have to talk to him, and that's what my purpose is that you should probably be talking to the people that can effectuate your change.
Well, I'm just trying to make it clear for the average citizen who wants to get involved in government in Taneytown so that they Even if they even knew that, that's an outside board, you're not supposed to contact
Right.
them, you have to do it this way, any explanation is better.
But they're not here either,
Not at all.
right? There's nobody here but the group that I've already told you can't do anything about the website. I've told you what to do about that.
Well, anyway, we won't be here till January, so I realize this was a chance for me to talk, so thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Adelaide. Does anybody have any other business? And do you have any other business to come before us, Jay? So it sounds like we just have the meeting to schedule in February to go over the final annual reports, and also is employee disclosures that we have to go over in. And those are due in by the employees by the end of January, so we have to go through that as well. Okay.
I would imagine the only reason we would meet prior to that is if the issue with the robocalls goes sideways and we need guidance on what to do.
Okay. And so if there's not a response to that, you'll let us
I
know.
think that would be the time where we ought to have to get together.
And then a new meeting would have to be called, the group to come together.
Makes sense.
Okay. All right. I want to thank you for your service to the town. And Clem, thank you so much. And committee members, thank you. It's
Are we gonna
an
set a
honor
date?
to serve with you. And,
We're gonna set a date?
Do you want to set a date at this
Set a
point?
date this far into February?
It can always be changed. I don't see why not. I mean,
Does we have a calendar?
I'll get the email that I got this time. Are we still having that meeting we set 4 months ago?
Let's work.
So it's a Tuesday right now. Does Tuesdays work?
As long as it's not the first Tuesday of the month.
Okay, that's the 6th. The 13th, the night before Valentine's Day.
No, what's the third?
The 20th, that's the day after President's Day.
And we have to get it done by the end of when do we have to have it
well,
done?
that sounds patriotic then. Why not the 20th?
You can have it done whenever you want to do it. There's no deadline.
Does the 20th sound like it's okay? We can preliminarily schedule
Yeah,
meeting
just
for February the
preliminary.
20th.
2/20/18.
To 2018.
Seven 7:30.
7:30 p.m. Having that date set, can I entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And wish you well on Friday.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, that will be a very tearful event that
I'm
day.
sure, yeah.
This was a file for Mr. Chamberlain that needs to be completed. Should I get that back to you?